Welcome to our channel. Today isn't just any day, it's Election Day in the United States. A day filled with excitement, anticipation, and the power to shape the nation's future. Every 4 years, Americans head to the polls, cast their ballots, and determine who will lead one of the world's most influential countries. But there's more happening beneath the surface than just voting booths and ballot counts. What goes on behind the scenes? How do politicians persuade you to choose them? And what's at stake, not only for the US but for the entire world? In today's video, we're taking you on a journey behind the scenes, uncovering the secrets, strategies, myths, and the biggest surprises of Election Day. Let's dive right in. Politicians don't just rely on luck to win your vote. There's a science behind it, a carefully planned strategy that uses psychology, data, and even some good old-fashioned charm. At the heart of it all is the understanding of human behavior. For instance, have you ever noticed that candidates tend to emphasize relatable, personal stories? That's because people connect with emotions more than with facts. Psychologists call this the identifiable victim effect, where people respond more to individual stories than to numbers or statistics. Politicians know that if they make themselves relatable, like sharing stories of their humble beginnings or family struggles, they can make voters feel they're one of them. Then, there's the power of targeted ads. With social media, campaigns have unprecedented access to your preferences, browsing habits, and even your personality. They use this data to create tailored ads designed to resonate specifically with you. If a candidate knows that a voter cares about climate change, for example, they'll show ads focusing on their environmental policies. It's a sophisticated process that feels personal, and that's exactly the point. Political campaigns also know how to handle crises. In fact, some might argue they're experts at turning potential disasters into opportunities. When a candidate is faced with controversy, their team will often spin the narrative to frame them as the underdog who's being unfairly attacked. This often triggers sympathy from voters, bringing them closer to the candidate. Ever wonder why the same issues tend to pop up close to Election Day? It's all part of the strategy. Now let's go where the cameras rarely go, behind the scenes of Election Day. This day is the culmination of months, even years of preparation. From polling stations to vote counting centers, every detail is meticulously planned to ensure a smooth election process. But how does it actually work? The first thing to understand is that Election Day is a massive logistical feat. Polling stations are set up in thousands of locations across the country, from schools and community centers to church basements. Each location is staffed by volunteers and officials, all of whom are trained to ensure the integrity of the voting process. Every ballot is accounted for, and security measures are in place to prevent tampering. When the polls close, the real work begins. Votes are carefully counted, often in the presence of bipartisan observers who ensure fairness. In states where the election is especially close, a recount might even be triggered, making for some tense hours or days before results are finalized. And what about the people who watch over the process? Known as poll watchers or election observers, these individuals are tasked with ensuring that everything is running smoothly. They're often members of the public, sometimes representing political parties or independent organizations. It's a serious job, and they have the power to report any irregularities. So while voters cast their ballots, an army of dedicated workers and volunteers is behind the scenes, making sure everything goes as it should. Now, let's bust some myths about Election Day. There are plenty of misconceptions floating around about how voting works, how important your vote actually is, and what goes on behind closed doors. One of the biggest myths is that polling results can reliably predict the outcome of an election. While polls give us a rough idea of where things stand, they're far from foolproof. Polls often have a margin of error, and as we've seen in recent elections, they can be completely wrong. People sometimes change their minds at the last minute, or they may not respond to polls honestly. Another myth? Some people believe their individual vote doesn't matter, especially in states where one party traditionally dominates. But in reality, every vote does count, and some elections have been decided by razor-thin margins. In 2000, for example, the presidential race came down to a mere 537 votes in Florida, changing the course of American history. Finally, there's a misconception about how secure voting really is. With the rise of online misinformation, many people fear that their votes could be manipulated. But in reality, Election security in the US is incredibly tight, with cybersecurity measures and strict protocols designed to prevent fraud. Officials use secure systems, backup plans, and monitoring technology to protect the integrity of the election. Why does the US presidential election matter globally? In this section, we'll look at how the outcome could impact the world at large. The US is one of the most powerful nations in the world, and its leadership influences global policy, economy, and security. Decisions made by the US president affect everything from trade agreements to military alliances. For example, the US has significant influence over organizations like NATO and the United Nations, which means that a change in leadership could shift these alliances. When it comes to climate policy, the US plays a huge role. Depending on who's elected, the country's stance on climate change could influence international efforts to combat global warming. The US is one of the largest carbon emitters, so if it takes aggressive action on climate change, it could inspire other countries to follow suit. And let's not forget about the economy. The US dollar is one of the world's reserve currencies, and the economic policies of the president can have a ripple effect on markets worldwide. In short, what happens on Election Day in the US affects not just Americans, but people all over the globe. Finally, let's end with some of the most unusual things that have happened on Election Day. Politics might be serious business, but Election Day has seen its fair share of strange and unexpected moments. For instance, did you know that in 1948 a newspaper famously printed the headline, "Dewey defeats Truman," before all the votes were counted? This premature call turned into one of the most iconic errors in journalism history when it turned out that Truman had actually won. In 1980, a well-known radio station mistakenly reported that Jimmy Carter had won re-election, causing a brief wave of confusion until the error was corrected. And in 2020, people across the US experienced some of the longest wait times on record, with some people waiting up to 11 hours to cast their vote. Then there's the tradition of voting stickers. In recent years, these little stickers have become a point of pride for Americans, with many people posting selfies with their "I voted" stickers. Some even collect them, as if they're pieces of Election Day memorabilia. It just goes to show that, while Election Day might be filled with tension, there's still room for humor and surprises. Conclusion: your vote, your voice, and there you have it. The US presidential election isn't just a day on the calendar, it's an event filled with strategy, mystery, and even a little bit of drama. Every vote is a piece of the bigger puzzle, shaping the future of the nation and, in many ways, the world.